The food service, hospitality, and retail industries are evolving in ways you've never heard of until now. Hosted by global industry technovator Rob Grimes and powered by the IFBTA, Tech Bytes is your go-to podcast, putting technology innovation and trends on the menu.
Rob Grimes, Tech Bytes at FSTEC. Well, so this is like a real pleasure because the person I'm about to introduce you to for our conversation today is somebody I talk to from time to time, but I'm betting this may be it'll be the second longest conversation because I had a long conversation with him.
Oh, I didn't know that part. Okay.
I'm betting that that's what it is. So please meet John Pepper, who is the founder of Boloco and actually a bunch of other things, but we're going to talk about that as well. And there's probably a tech story in this whole thing as well. And so we're just sort of here to have a conversation. So you asked me, about how many FSTECs I've been to, which is a long time. How many FSTECs have you been to?
Well, I think it dates back to maybe 07?
07.
07. You asked me to speak at least in one of them in the last 10, 12 years.
And now we're speaking now, so it must have been pretty good.
Yeah. Well, I like FSTEC.
Okay.
Good show.
So
it's a little different than it used to be.
Okay. Well, before we talk about that.
All right.
So you're sort of like a serial entrepreneur of things. And what I've learned is, well, of course, Boloco is not the only restaurant group. You did another one.
Yeah.
Be Good?
Be Good.
Okay.
He's a co-founder of Be Good and Boloco. So Boloco, I'll just tell you real quick. Boloco I co-founded with 2 and sometimes 3, depending on how you look at it. We were like, later, we were like, you were a founder, to the 4th guy. He was. So that was
like the unknown Beatle who they got rid of?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. I don't even know his name, but he was one of the original Beatle, right? There was an original Beatle.
Who I don't even know.
If I remember. Well, I don't know either, but I know there's an original.
So this was when I was in business
guy, do we know who he is?
Jason Hutchinson.
Okay, good.
Good guy. You don't know who he is. No, I do.
All right.
So I'm in business school, 2nd year. I had lived in San Francisco, fell in love with the sort of food culture, Mission District, and then this place called World Wraps. I don't know if you remember.
Yes, I know all about it.
So, I'm good friends with a lot of those guys today, but we were like, we're going to take that beautiful concept and we're going to bring it to the East Coast. We're going to innovate within the tortilla, which they stopped doing pretty quickly after we started because they struggled. And we were like, oh no, our idol has disappeared, basically. But Boloco was very simply a, what we call today a globally inspired burrito joint. Not just rice, beans, and cheese, but like take the best culinary traditions from all over the world, put it into a tortilla. So that was Boloco. I started that as a 2nd year, getting my MBA. Be Good we started that one in January of 04. So that was 7 years later. Built that one to about 80 restaurants before we sold it in 17. I sold my part. A couple of the guys stayed on. Boloco at its peak was at 22 restaurants in 13. I left that business for a while, and I've since repurchased it.
Yes, I know that.
And I've used it as a great petri dish.
That could be a good thing or a bad thing.
No,
you never know what grows in a petri dish. So,
well, so you're thinking too literally.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I think of it as a petri dish for the things I care most about, which are 2 things. One is why we're here, which is early stage technology, which I just love.
Because we have drinks and we're just talking. That's why we're here.
And then the second is really like how do you change the equation for the employees in hourly work? And how do you build a business model that still works and really takes care of people while they're there and helps them move on to better?
Well, we'll drill down on those things because these are actually like really good subjects to have a conversation about. But I'm curious. So in business school, you're out in San Francisco right?
Well, actually, I lived in San Francisco and then went back to Dartmouth up in New Hampshire.
Oh, that's the other way.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, but I couldn't get it out of my head.
Do you come from a restaurant background?
Absolutely not. No.
So the story is you really fell in love. So the West Coast food, and you sort of fell in love with a concept, and you decided to do your own concept along those lines. Hey, let's do this on the East Coast.
Yeah.
Is that the idea?
That's it. That was the idea.
I'll tell you the first experience that I actually had with Boloco was in Washington. You opened up a unit in Bethesda.
That's right.
And what was your IT guy's name? It was
Ben?
Who was it?
Abin Sapkota?
Nope.
Oh, Jim Lux.
Yeah, Jim. Oh, Jim Lux, of course, right? Because he worked with us on the IFPTA in Boston. So he invited me there, and what I thought was very interesting at the time is he had this visual wall.
Yeah.
And it was really very cool.
Yeah,
you know, the different things, and it must have cost a fortune because today your per square inch of like a display would be like a lot less, right?
Yeah.
But I just thought it was very forward thinking. And people were able to send messages, if I remember, and they were able to do things, send it to the wall. And then, by the way, Hard Rock sort of copied it, just so you know, because I saw that later on.
Yeah. No, we were early on that one.
I thought it was good. So anyway, so I always viewed you guys as doing some really creative things in food, but also in the technology. Now, you mentioned that there's a couple reasons why you're here. You know, one is the industry, the other's the tech, but you also said the word early stage.
Yeah.
So what exactly does that mean when you say early stage? What have you gotten involved in?
Well, so going way back, right? I was at the NRA show.
That would be Buns, Not Guns.
Right. The other NRA.
I went down this thing and I said to somebody, the right NRA, then I realized maybe the right NRA wasn't the other NRA, but that's a political conversation we probably shouldn't be having here. So, okay.
No.
But Buns,
Although
Not
I'm
Guns.
happy to do it.
We're good.
So I see this little booth with this guy kind of just standing there. And I was so frustrated with some of the big POS companies. We'd already gotten through 2. I'm 3 years into the business. This is like 2000, 2001. And I'm like, what do you do? And he says, you don't need, we do internet POS. It wasn't cloud. It was before really you used the word cloud. And so he said, everything you do will be based in Michigan, but we provide the boxes for cheap, and we do all the updates there. And so I was like, I'm in. This was called Net POS.
Yeah.
Actually, Plum.
Yep.
The future of it is Plum, which is somewhere in here now.
Well, it's not next door, but Altimetrics is next door that has Plum.
Right there.
Yeah, so that's why they're back to back, because they're owned by Altimetrics, so it's part of the same thing.
So Plum is the next phase of what was NetPOS. We used NetPOS successfully for 14 years, right? And I didn't know then what I know today, which is like, it's great to be the user.
Did you invest in them?
No.
Oh, okay.
And I was also a very early user, one of the first customers of a company called GoMobo. Do you know what GoMobo is? So Olo, right?
Yeah.
And
they're right across the aisle. How come everybody we're sort of mentioning is like within
I know
they're in a big hall. They're like right around.
Well, here's one that's not here anymore. Level Up. So we were launch partners
Boston
with those
company
guys.
got that.
We were, and then there was another one that came along, and there's about 8 others. We won't go through them, but there's another one that came along where someone said to me at an Ernst & Young, one of those entrepreneur dinners of the year award. We did a few things.
I have one of those awards.
We did, yeah.
It's on my shelf.
Same, mine too.
There you go.
What year were you?
94.
Oh my God. Okay.
Now I do realize I have a microphone on, so everybody heard that. Okay.
Yeah.
That was a very interesting year for me. So,
yeah, 2012 was like my peak in the restaurant business.
By the way, sitting at my table in Washington D.C. when I got that was the owner was Steve Case. Got it that year too.
No way.
So then I went to
AOL. Yeah.
So
in
then
94, that makes
but
sense.
he's at my table, right? So I get it. I'm sitting there with Steve Case, and so we go out to Palm Springs where they had their annual thing, and we really thought he was going to win that year, like the big award. No.
Who did win that year? Do you remember?
Yes, I do. They used to call them the Four Horsemen in restaurants. Does that help you out at all?
No. It's before my time.
Outback Steakhouse.
Oh, wow.
There were 4 founders, and they won that year. So Restaurant Group won. The tech guy did not. And I don't know. Maybe we knew something, right?
Next year. I mean, 95 is when they really blew up, I think, right? It went big.
There you go.
Well, for me, it was another Steve that I sat next to at my dinner, and his name is Steve Papa, and he wrote the first check for Toast. And he said, hey, John, we had not met. He's like, I got a couple guys. Can you help them? Can you meet with them? Right? So this is in 13.
Yeah, I get it.
And so I met with them, and there was Aman and Steve, and we met in a hotel lobby.
There were 3 of them, right?
There were 3 founders, but it was Aman and Steve who I met, and there were 8 guys in an apartment kind of doing this.
I once went to a hacker house and I don't want to derail this conversation, but I went to a hacker house in Palo Alto. I'd never seen one.
Yeah.
And somebody wanted me to look at a product that was out there. And I met the founders and everything, and all these people in this house. And there was some TV program on, I forget what it was called, but it was, it was on Netflix or something like that during COVID. And I went out there, and I'm like having a mind blank for a second, but I'll figure out who it was. But they today went public, $2 billion. And all I said, they wanted me to advise them, and I had these rules saying, listen, I can't get involved in selling a product. That's happened a lot. It's not PassSpot. It was they do the filming. They do the filming of the food on the tray. It's and Compass invested in them, and they're in the airports. It's Mashton. So, by the way,
I love
on my PC, I have the original business plan that they gave me, but I didn't do it.
I love that company.
Yep. Anyway,
I talked to them last year, actually.
Yeah. Well, this lady, they don't even know who she was. But
there's a competitor over in the alley.
No, there's a few. I've seen them over in Asia. So anyway, Toast.
Yeah.
So you were.
So anyway, that's a good example of one that we all know these days, where you literally can't know. But by then, I had learned either invest, or if you're going to be an early customer and you're going to put your business at risk, at least ask for advisory shares or early customer shares or whatever you have, right? So that's sort of been my model since 2013, is either invest, or if I can help. If I can't help, just let me invest. So, so my relationship with Toast has been a long one. But
you're helping to advise them. You went on their advisory board. I've seen some of the postings and things, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm on their cab and stuff like that, and doing other things. But there's also other companies like Margin Edge and Opus and Ovation. And so I've worked with all those guys, invested in them, and tried to be an early adopter and an early supporter of.
Well, if you're going to invest in something, you might as well do something you're passionate about, something that's going to work in your units. That makes a lot of sense, because then they also, use you as a petri dish testing ground.
Yeah, they do.
The good sense.
Yeah.
And they can do that as well. So, you made a comment early on about how things have sort of changed in tech since then, and obviously they have, right? But if we take a look, I don't know, COVID's a funny thing, because COVID caused a lot of change a lot quicker, and it got some technologies that were going dead, like kiosks and stuff, that aren't dead. And then other technologies that maybe were going to be out there disappeared. Yeah. So where do you see, or what is it that you would find exciting here this year? Is there something that you came here to look for that you said, hey, I sort of heard about this, I think it'll be here? Or
I'll be honest with you. I'm always disappointed in the one thing that I'm always looking for.
The one. What's the one?
There's one thing, and that is technology that will amplify the voice of the worker in the restaurant. The technology that will allow that person to say, they'll look at this technology and they'll say, this technology is for me, it's for my benefit, and it's for my future, and it's going to give me the information that those of us who consider ourselves in like the knowledge economy.
So how do you see that? What are we specifically, when you say give them the information, what are we talking about?
So I drove for Uber during my little hiatus back in 13, 14, 15.
Do you know Aaron Novoshin?
Very well.
He drove for Lyft.
We did. We both did it at the same time.
And he and I, so there was a dirty secret that I had, but now I can talk about because I got fired. I didn't really get fired. But for 9 years, I've been a barista in Starbucks.
No way.
And they don't know what I do for a living. I donated all the money to their cup fund.
Yeah.
But let me tell you what it did for me. And Aaron and I had this conversation because he brought this up, and I'm like, what it did for me is I could understand as a $17 an hour employee, and people don't know what I'm doing, I'm donating all my money, right? That I could understand, what are they looking at? How do they think the technology is working? I can also tell you that firsthand that tech came in and took the culture out, so the communication was gone, right?
That's great.
So you were doing so you're doing this
Uber, and I'm starting to get feedback about my performance in my workplace, which happens to be my front seat. And I noticed that it's motivating me just a little bit to pick up the crumbs on the back seat, right? This is before GPS. The app had the GPS, so I had to get ready for the, for the customer. I had little shortcuts because you texted them at the time. U1 was, hey, I'm on my way. And I thought back to the restaurant industry, which I had exited, I thought, forever at that point. And I thought, they're not getting They're not
should have
getting
been an Uber Eats driver.
They're not getting information, right?
Yeah.
They're not getting information about their workplace. There's no peer-to-peer feedback. My voice in my workplace isn't being shared. If I, you know, one of the biggest indicators of a good quality job is who you work with all day.
Right.
And you have no say in who gets hired, who retention and all those things, and you're not getting feedback. And I always say it needs to be constructive, not destructive. We built an app, so I did co-found another company, which has since kind of gone on its way, called Worthy, which was the employee app. And the idea was take the information, figure out what your strengths are, and start building on those to find your way either up in that organization or even maybe out of the restaurant business altogether.
So
start to give you that pathway, if that makes sense.
So I find, first of all, I'm right with you with the employee. So we spend it seems that the applications for the employees tend to be reactive rather than proactive because 100%. It's how do we keep people from unionizing? Or how do we connect, right? How do we do the schedule? How do we do those types of things that are out there? So I also recognize, especially since you were in San Francisco, that sometimes there's regulations get in the way too. Yeah. So, if you have something running on a employee's phone, then you have to pay them for their time, and
there is
we sort of lose, you know, the ability to do the other part of it that we're really enhancing, you know, their ability to work and furthering them along. So, what do you think is the application? Maybe it doesn't exist yet, but because you're passionate about this, what is the single thing, two things, you can have whatever you want, that you think really would make a difference in the lives of an employee in the food service industry that doesn't really exist now, but it's sort of like one of those things you just wish you could do and you just know darn well it would make a difference?
So number one, a lot of people are, so there's LinkedIn, right? We're all on LinkedIn, right? And LinkedIn is sort of a resume, a digital resume, right? Very few of our team who make hourly wages find themselves on LinkedIn, right? So number one is, who are you as a person? Can you describe that person? Did you go to the career counseling office at college? No. Nobody helped you really look at, and I'm generalizing.
Wasn't this the idea, though, behind either doing Facebook groups or doing Slack or something like that?
Yeah.
Well, Slack's more for the communication side.
It always ends up being like that.
Yeah, it's about communication.
And by the way, Slack, the hourly workers aren't on Slack. We couldn't get it to stick in our organization, right? It's WhatsApp usually. But here's the point. What I'm trying to say is this.
Yeah, okay, but the hourly workers aren't necessarily on WhatsApp either.
The ones who come from other countries are.
That's exactly what I was about to say, because I am forced to use WhatsApp if I want to communicate with anybody in another country. Yeah. So I have to have WhatsApp out there. I got to have, you know, whatever it is.
So look, there's a few steps here. I'm going to just lay this out. Number one is, how do you get people to figure out what their resume looks like? With AI, I've been testing this for the last 2-3 years. It's amazing how fast someone can rattle off a few things they like to do, that they've done, where they went to school, and all of a sudden you're like, create a resume, done. So that's step one. Someone needs to just bottle that one up and put it out there so that there's a catch-up mode, right? The second thing is, how do you put that online? And the third thing is pathways to your to the thing that you wish you could do. Maybe it is in the restaurant, and I love people who love being in the restaurant business because they get joy out of that work. But maybe it's not, and we as restaurant people should not always try to convince people to stay. One of the things we could do for our legacy is be that place that people look back at and say, that was such a critical stepping stone in my career that ended up being wherever.
I think that with as many people who have worked in our industry in the NRA, buns not guns, would go ahead and say this, the percentage of the people in the U.S. that have worked, but even without getting into politics, the number of politicians who instantly bring up that they worked as a cashier in McDonald's, right? They all bring it up, you know, because they have that. However, I'd like to follow your thought on this a little bit, because so we should have a conversation. I will ask you a question in a few minutes that has to do with sort of deja vu, you know, kind of stuff. But if you think about it, I remember when it wasn't Scoots, it was Redbook Connect, but they called it Redbook Connect for a short period of time because of Redbook. But it was, the people behind that's now Fourth, and Compete, and it was that group, right? And they had this idea. But by the way, the CEO didn't last very long, who had the idea. He was in San Francisco. I met him in San Francisco. They had this idea that they were going to create a industry database. Oh, Hot Schedules.
Hot Schedule.
They owned Hot Schedules. They owned Hot Schedules at the time, right? So they were going to do an industry database because they had figured out on Hot Schedules that the employees would actually pay for it, for $2 a month or whatever it was, to be able to control their schedules and have this tool. That was an amazing feat that they could go ahead and collect that kind of money. So they had this idea. They thought they would do a global database because one of the issues that we have is unions have this. Like if you look at in New York City, you could have a waiter for lunch at one hotel and they're at another hotel serving you dinner. Okay, maybe the restaurants are not getting there, but the skill sets of, hey, this person is a certified person who can do the grill.
Totally.
Or serve safe, or whatever it's going to be. We don't have transferable skills that are even kept in a vault somewhere that says, I need this skill set, right? So they had this idea they were going to do that, but it never went out. It just didn't go out, but it might have been before its time. But I tell you what, let's just take a break for a minute, and then we should just actually, I want to ask you about, these kinds of things. So we'll take a break and we'll come back.
With the rapid expansion of technology in the food and beverage industries, finding the right supplier can become overwhelming and complicated. To simplify this process, the IFBTA created Exchange. Exchange is a powerful search tool where users can easily narrow down their technology search and refine results by application type, geography served, department, and more. Browse resources and learn more about the industry's technology suppliers at exchange.ifbta.org. Now, back to the show.
So we're back, and I'm with John Pepper, and we are having a conversation, and we left off, actually. So Restaurateur, early stage investor in technology, and I'd say technology is a passion, but didn't start in the industry, but figured out when he was in business school, pre-business school, he was in San Francisco, he liked to eat, maybe there'd be, listen, they bring this thing over and started Boloco up and then took it from there and invested and did a bunch of different things that he was passionate about. And by the way, we haven't talked about what didn't work out, but we were talking about labor, which is a passion for you. Okay, and what we can do in the industry and what's worked and what hasn't worked. So there are a lot of challenges in our industry today.
Yeah.
So putting aside, look, I'm a restaurant manager who's in technology. I'm not technology first, right? So I'm sitting here thinking that what is the problem in the industry today? You've already pointed out about the place where they can all go and get the resume and stuff. But what would help us to make our industry one that people do want to stay in, has a career path in it, and then how can technology help? I mean, where do you see the failings of the industry? Okay, so I do believe, by the way, where you were headed before was maybe the word community. That, we were talking about how do you get that community and get people passionate about being in the industry. But it's not necessarily, but it needs to be a pathway to something too, not just because you can get it as a part-time job.
Yeah. So I think we're still stuck. I mean, one of the reasons that I think restaurants are subject to being automated with robots and AI is because we still rely on robotic movements a lot of the time, right? So, and what that means is it takes a toll on people over time. It's very repetitive. There are a few people, God love them, and I love some repetitive motions like mowing the lawn and chainsawing, but
you can get a robot to mow the lawn, chainsaw.
I know, but I would like to do it. So I'm like in that category of people.
All right.
I just am. I just trust me. But I really think that we need to start, really respecting the fact that people will burn out pretty quickly if it's the same thing over and over again, which if you have a manager who's not really thinking about the quality of that job, right? They're going to just be like, look, you're lucky to have a job. We pay you well, even if they don't. And, you kind of need to just keep doing what you're doing. Right. And people don't know how to develop people. They just don't. And when I say that, I don't mean develop them even sometimes with the skills necessary to make a great burrito. but let alone, leadership skills. In our case, we taught people English for the last 27 years who came to this country without
But we may be able to help them with that because of some of the, language translation that's instantaneous. So those are things that help us, right?
Well, if you want to make more money in this country, it helps to speak English. And that was one insight I had within a year.
That you work, right? If you're in front of the house or back of the house. But the robotics thing, a lot of people caught heat on that when they said that they're going to put robotics in to go ahead and reduce labor. Now, I didn't actually see it as a labor reduction. I do get the point where you're talking about consistency and sort of robotic types of jobs.
A robot doesn't care.
The robots are in the back of the house. That's where this is going to happen now. In the front of the house eventually, but right now it's just a helper. Takes dishes, maybe delivers some food.
Doing their thing. We've got Hyphen I invested in, which is Chipotle now, is using that. I mean, I think there's a lot to be said for, I have people with carpal tunnel that have worked for us for 20 years, being on your feet all day, it's hard. So how do you mix that up and make the workplace a richer workplace, a richer experience for the employee? And I think that's where we miss a lot. I think, this idea, I saw this happen recently in one of my own restaurants where I heard someone say, hey, someone just sent me home. We stopped doing that 20 years ago.
Right.
These things come back. Human nature is like, we signed up to give this person 8 hours of a shift. You can't send them home after 5 hours.
That's how I lost my job at Starbucks.
That crushes them, So,
but you can't develop loyalty, and you can't develop a community either.
They've got to go find another job that minute. That minute, they're looking. They're like, okay, they're not taking care of me. How can I take care of that restaurant? And I think treating people like that, it is widespread.
But if you had the centralized database of skill sets, you actually could get into more gig workers in the industry as well, which that also is a desirable thing. That didn't exist. When you couldn't be a gig worker there, they really wanted you full time, and maybe you'd work part time if you're in school.
Yeah.
But you didn't really have that option to share shifts and to do things like that, although that has a cost, to it. So I
just the quality of the workplace, the training of people in things other than how to run a shift. All these things. We had a class that we put so many people through called compassionate leadership. I know that sounds lame to a lot of people.
I was going to comment on that, because when I talk to people about robotics and computers, and I talk about like the computer age, the one reason why when people say you're talking about replacing people with computers, which by the way, I never use the word never.
Right.
Because 50 years from now, sure.
We can.
Okay, but we'll be doing other things. So, but the one thing that makes the hospitality industry different is the word, empathy, and caring. And it is difficult to teach a computer today to care and to have that empathy and be able to deliver that in service.
Correct.
Even in preparing food as an art, right? So that's why computers, at least for the short term, are not going to replace people, because we still need that free thought, creativity, and you need the empathy and compassion that is needed, to serve guests.
Yeah.
So, so it's not a done deal.
Not a done deal.
Eventually.
Too often, though, right? Even with what we're saying, waxing poetic about that empathy, there's so many times you don't get it with the human.
Because people don't care. Right. We're losing the passion in our industry, and it's just a job.
Yeah.
And that's where the technology either hurts us or it helps us, to be able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just sort of changing gears a little bit.
Okay.
Since you've been around for a while and you've invested and seen things. So you said, we're not talking about all your investments and stuff, or things maybe you missed out on you should have done, but
no. I mostly made mistakes. For the whole 28 years?
So, all right. So do I ask you what's the biggest mistake, if you're willing to admit it, that you might have made, or where maybe you called the tea leaves the wrong way?
It just depends on how you define success.
Maybe you thought something was just going to blow up and happen, and I
thought Boloco was going to blow up. And then, it took some hard, we learned in the school of hard knocks. I didn't raise money for 9 years until we got to our 10th location. We really wanted this thing to be profitable. We wanted what I called it to be a beautiful company before we went to private equity, which we did. I would never say it was a mistake to raise private equity money, I'm writing a book right now. I'm close to finishing it. I worked on it all summer. About the lessons learned from taking outside money and how all of the vision...
I never took outside money, but there are times I probably should have.
Right, exactly. And there's trade-offs, right?
Absolutely. And being public is a trade-off of not being public.
Yeah.
You own your buildings in one thing, and you better not own your buildings in the other.
I think, I'll be honest, the thing where I really made, like, so Be Good, we talked about Be Good, right? The smartest thing I ever did was help them for about 6 months back in 2004. I was like their bookkeeper, and I would help them with systems. You know, we even gave them our smoothie recipes because back then, really Google couldn't find everything. It didn't matter. But is letting them go and do their thing. And we had a wonderful exit 13 years later. And I got out of their way. I was on their board. Once in a while, I'd pipe up and they'd get upset that I did. But, you know, really not assuming everybody's going to do things as you would is one thing I've learned, right? That took me 5 years to realize I not only do I care more, I care too much. It's actually unhealthy. It's like to care too much is like a disease. It really is. Like, you'd rather not be afflicted with it, but when you've got
I get it, because you just live. By the way, that won't be a healthy thing because that's what people do when they actually are passionate and they care about something. Yeah. You know, it's a personal thing. Sometimes I feel that way walking around here. It's sort of an interesting thing, right? When you find a few people, and it's not everybody, and I used to treat everybody like, if I give you an opportunity, you're going to run with it, aren't you? And the answer is, you're not, right? You have to get people to buy into something or it fails. They've got to really believe it in their heart, and they'll move mountains. And make it their own, and really make it their own. And I think that up. So what were we talking about? The things that didn't work. So what about the things that was the best thing? You know what's interesting is Boloco isn't Chipotle, and that sometimes it hurts my ego, right? Like there's a lot of ego wrapped up inside. You could be the president of Starbucks right now. Then we'd be having a different conversation. That's true. I could not be. I would have blown Starbucks up. The things that went right were sticking to my guns under all costs of the things that I believed mattered most. Right. To a detriment. And I think that when I look at my wife and my kids in the eye and a few other people, because it's not a big group, right? But when I think about what I did do and attempted to do through empowering people, I don't look at that. If you've done that, I feel like you can't fail. Now, financially, could have done better in different areas, but we built Boloco to 22 restaurants. We were before we raised money, we were fully profitable. I remember saying we're not going to open another restaurant when we got to Unit 6 until this thing is not, adjusted EBITDA positive, but EBITDA positive, net income positive, the whole ball of wax, right? So. And we did that for 2 years, and then Bank of America, which was Fleet at the time, showed us some money. I hear you. We got to grow, and so I felt good that we built a core business that worked. And then, we had tons of fun with social media, marketing. Yeah, look, it was fun. That is the thing that computers take out of our business is, I miss that word, culture. Yeah. Right? And that's why when the founder gets out or the company gets too big, you lose the original culture. I always ask people when, you walk around a show like this and I talk to a startup. Yeah. I always ask them, what was the motivation? What was it? Just like I asked you, what's the motivation? Why did you come into it? And sometimes you're just sort of surprised. And sometimes, by the way, you're in Boston area. So listen, if you knew how many business plans I've heard from business students at Harvard who presented a new tech thing. And I always get the phone calls from some buddy of mine that went to Harvard, and he goes, so I was judging it. These guys won the thing. They've got a great technology for the restaurant industry. Why don't you look at it? So they go and I ask the question, I say, so what was the motivation? They go, well, I go drinking in Harvard Square in Cambridge and I eat at the restaurant. The bartender told me I need, and then my next question for him is, today, I would ask them, if I'm being nice, I might not ask this, but I say, so did you try Googling that just to see if there was something out there? But I've learned my lesson. Sometimes while it may seem that the idea, and they should have done maybe better homework, sometimes there's one little kernel in there. And at that point, if it's not a complete thing, I'll say to them, listen, let me introduce you to so-and-so because they have something that's different, right? Because they came from outside the industry.
Yeah.
As, by the way, many of the people that are here, right? So it's the same sort of thing. So, since you like tech, you know, is there some sort of personal tech or something that you're just aiming to get that you don't have?
Get what?
I don't know, any kind of tech. Is there something that you just say, that sounds interesting and I'd like to, you know, not something you're going to invest in, but just something out there?
I mean, the ultimate tech,
sure,
which is hardware and software for me, but it's hardware. Okay. You know, when DJI, right, which is like these guys right here, when DJI first came out with their drone, the Phantom,
okay,
right, I was like, someone said, hey, you would like to order. I ordered it on the spot. Like, I was just like, bam. As I still do every time they come up with an update, I eBay the old one for the new one. But
so you like drones?
Absolutely no way. Oh, it was the first time. I used to be a pilot when I was in college until I had 3 close calls. Got a little spooked.
Got it.
But it was the first time I'd been back up in the air and felt like I had, you know, a full view of like where I live up in Vermont, New Hampshire. But I can't wait. And I feel like we're 5 years out. That same DJI technology, it's going to have to be an octocopter, but we are going to be sitting in little pods, and we're going to fly over there.
Okay,
we're going to fly here.
So appreciative of you, but so I go to
wanted to talk about Restaurateur?
No, but I tell you what, I go to a lot of shows. I see a lot of things. So I was at CES about 5-6 years ago before, and they had a drone there that was a motorcycle you sat on.
Yeah,
it came out of Dubai. And the police were, you know, Dubai does these funky things with cars and they make them police cars. This was a police motorcycle drone. It had the 4 big fans on it and the guy sits on it. The police are using it there. And they were in the hall. They're going up a few feet in the ground and stuff. But I looked at that because I'm not necessarily a huge fan of the drone delivery as we look at it right now. But I am a fan of the idea of either autonomous drones like that can have a bigger payload that can deliver, or autonomous vehicles for that matter. But I looked at that and I said, that's going to be the way to go. It's basically 4 big fans, and you know, and every time I do a sci-fi movie,
there's got to be some redundancy because if one of those fans goes down, it's over.
So yeah, the deal is this.
Can I just say something?
Sure.
I don't want to take credit for anything in this world, but I stuck on that DJI Phantom 2. I stuck a basket from Boloco on the bottom. I had my whole family out on the deck. This is in 2015, 2016. We put a burrito on it. And if you go on YouTube right now, it should be like millions of views. It's like 200. It's like, it was like the most beautiful delivery of a burrito by a drone you've ever seen.
So that's going to be the discussion that we should have at a future conversation about things that were before their time.
Yeah.
Or things that died but have come back. That's the deja vu. But we sort of run out of time, but you're giving me like a whole bunch of subjects and telling me that, you know, we're going to need to continue the conversation. So, John, thank you so much, you know, for joining me today in conversation at FSTEC.
Yeah.
And I'll be very interested to see sort of what I was going to say next chapter, but you got a book coming out. So I guess I could find that out, right?
We'll see. I got to publish it.
Oh, it'll get published. You know, we'll figure that one out.
I'll self-publish it if I have to.
You'll self-publish. Yeah. But listen, thank you for joining me and just sort of sharing your perspective here on Tech Byte. So Rob Grimes with John Pepper, and it's been a treat having a conversation with you here at FSTEC.
Thank you.
Thank you. This podcast is brought to you by the International Food and Beverage Technology Association. The IFPTA is the industry's voice of food service, hospitality, and retail technology, all put together. We provide thought leadership as your single, impartial, and go-to resource. The IFPTA offers in-person and online communities to connect with your peers, the exchange and all-encompassing global technology resource, and an industry-wide professional education and certification program. The bottom line is the IFPTA is your place to gather, learn, and share in conversations like the one we're having today. So thank you for joining us on this episode of Tech Bytes powered by the IFBTA. I'm Rob Grimes, your host, and I look forward to taking our next bite of technology together.